There is a moment in every life when you decide to rise, to stand taller than your fear, to speak louder than your doubt, to chase the vision that sets your soul on fire. This is that moment, and here we walk it together with stories that awaken, voices that inspire, and truths that set you free. This is Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where hope has a voice, and that voice is yours. I gotta tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we have been looking for this show all day long because we've got a great guest who has a lifetime of being in the spotlight, of playing. And Rochelle, I would love for you to introduce our guest today and tell us a little bit about who we get to talk to for the next hour.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I would be more than honored. We have the one and only original Jimmy Madison here with us today. I couldn't say this better, so I'm going to read exactly what Google says. And it says, American jazz drummer with a career spanning over 6 decades, started playing the drums professionally age 10 and was considered a child prodigy and is still here with us today to be on Positive Talk Radio to have a great conversation with Kevin and I. So welcome, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm just fine.
How does it feel, Jimmy, to be a prodigy when you were 10 years old and you've met some of the most remarkable human beings that have walked the planet over the last 6 decades or more? How do you feel about all that?
Well, I didn't know that I was a child prodigy when I was a child. The only thing that I did know was that when I had very bad teeth when I was a little kid, so I was always in the dentist's office, and for some reason or other, I always used big words, multi-syllable words from the time I was like 4 years old. My father used to call those $3 words. And I would, while we'd be waiting in the waiting room for one of my many dental visits, I would entertain the rest of the patients with, whatever. And apparently I got kind of a reputation for that. I don't know.
And you have been a drummer of note for many, many years now. And you've done, and by the way, and we're here to talk about your biography, which is the book that you've written along with your publicist. And I want to give a shout out to your publicist. Her name is Jane, right?
Jane Snyder. Jane R. Snyder.
And I know she's at one point going to listen to this, and I know that she has been very instrumental in getting your story out, which, by the way, your story had to be told.
Thank you.
So Rochelle, any thoughts leading off the conversation?
So, Jimmy, I have known we were going to do the show with you since the beginning of the week. And for some reason, it sparked something in my mind because I remember my grandpa, he loved jazz music and he had his own version of it. It wasn't the songs that he played along with, it sounded the same. It was everything in between. And so I'm wondering, when you started this journey and you would play the drums as a child, what did that feel like? What was the spark you felt inside?
Well, actually, when I was still in high chair mode, and my parents, who both were musicians, my mother was a trumpet player in the best dance band in Cincinnati during the Second World War, and my father was a pianist who wanted to be a classical composer and tried to get into Juilliard, but he was turned down. And then he tried to get into commercial music, but he wrote good, but he was too slow, so that didn't work. So they both ended up being engineers later on and worked for General Electric and other people. But anyway, they noticed that whenever they had jazz on the radio, that I'd be beating on the high chair with my spoon in time to the music. And the other influence, of course, was on Sundays. We'd always listen to the Cleveland Orchestra under George Zell. So I got a classical background that way, too. But anyway, they have decided to take me to a guy named Tommy Thompson, who was the chief timpanist in the Cincinnati Symphony, to see if I had any talent. Well, I was like 4, I think. I don't remember, maybe 5. And she took me over there, and they put me up to the drum, and the drum was that tall, and I was only this tall. I was reaching up to, and I was way too young to take any kind of direction. And I just wanted to, hit the drum. And so Tommy Thompson said, well, he looks like he might have some talent, but he's too young to really find out. So bring him back in a couple of years. Well, during the couple of years, he ended up dying of I don't know what. And that was basically the end of my classical career. It was a good thing because I ended up going the other way. So that's how it started. And so I was building drum sets out of boxes when I was 6 and 7 years old. When I was about 7 years old, they got me a real teacher with a snare drum. But before that, when I was 5 or 6, I was building drum sets out of cardboard boxes and then pounding them into a pulp and then building them. And then when I was 7, they said, well, it's time to get this guy some real instruction. So the guy named Ed Vollmer, who was my first drum teacher. And in the book, I have a picture of me like sitting there like a kid with this great big snare drum. And so he started me off teaching me, rudiments and how to read, drum music and everything. And so that went on. And then when I was 10, I had about 2 or 3 years worth of lessons, but I never practiced. I was really a lazy little kid. And so like 10 minutes before the lesson, I would run in to try woodshed, and he'd show up and he'd know instantly that I hadn't practiced. And he'd say, Madison, he says, you could be good, but if you want to be good, you have to practice. And that didn't cut any ice with me. I still didn't. So when I was 10, we moved to another neighborhood and we moved all our stuff. And the snare drum, which I still had, which then I hadn't been touching, went into my closet. And a year or so later, it was like, Fibber McGee and Molly McGee's closet was all full of stuff. I opened the door and the snare drum rolled right out in front of me. And I went, oh, snare drum. That's when I got the fire in the belly. So I got my mother, while she was a trumpet player, knew a guy named Jack Volk, who was the staff drummer at WLW Television in Cincinnati. There was a woman named Ruth Lyons who had this thing called the 50-50 Club, and she'd have all these old ladies and she'd have guests. And he was in the band. He became my second teacher, and I would go to my mother. I was way too young to drive. Would drive me over to the other side of town to his house, and he would go down the basement, and he had 2 sets of drums. He would be on one, I'd be on the other, and then he would show me how to be a commercial drummer, how to play a cha-cha, how to play a rumba, how to do stuff that, to be a commercial drummer. And I will never forget when the Bossa Nova first came out, we spent the whole evening, both of us, trying to learn how to play the Bossa Nova. Do this with one hand and you have to do that with the other hand and something else with the foot. And very quickly it became so, it wasn't so much he was teaching me, but we were sort of learning together, because I don't know whether I taught him anything, but it was like a multiple, both of us were in it together kind of. And so, by the time I was 12, I had cobbled together this ratty little drum set. I bought a cheap bass drum and a cheap hi-hat, borrowed a cymbal from school. And when I was 12, my parents bought me a brand new professional Ludwig drum kit, which at that time cost the enormous sum of $600. It would be worth several thousand today.
That's a lot of money back then.
And I started working what they call club dates. You know what club dates are? They are like weddings, bar mitzvahs, dance affairs, commercial kind of gigs. But I was really into Dave Brubeck, and so were the people in the band that I worked with. So we would just play like Dave Brubeck, and the dancers didn't care as long as they could dance, businessman's bounce, And I paid them back every penny from that drum set. In those days, I was making either $10 or $15, depending on what the gig was, which is an enormous amount of money when you're 12 years old. You know, if I had 2 gigs in a week, I was $25, you know. So anyway, that's how it all started. And then I started working professionally, and I just had very good luck with everything. Somebody from the University of Cincinnati got me involved with this radio show that they did on Saturdays called it was a WGUC, and it was called UC Jazz Notes. And every Saturday we'd go and tape a jazz show. And so I had to learn not to be a recording musician, to be a drummer, to be a band member, all at the same time. And the band was, oh my God, the guy named Cliff Daly was a terrible trumpet player. Bob Pollock was the piano player. He was okay, but he was corny. The only 2 guys who really could play were either Owen or Brian Hodge. They were brothers, and they both played bass. And then me, the new fish, who was just trying to hang on for dear life and not screw up. And so that show went on for several years. And it was, I mean, what a great thing to happen to me when I was that young. I was like 12 or 14, maybe 14, 15. You know, you couldn't call up to heaven and say, hey, God, I need, and say, here it is, do it. So that's basically how I got started.
That's amazing.
Jimmy, do you remember what year this was? This was in the late 50s, early 60s, wasn't it?
No, it was a little earlier than that. I was born in 1947. So my first drum lesson was when I was in about 1952. About 1955 is when we moved, or 55, maybe 57. And then this was, I was about 13 or 14. So that would be the early 60s, very early 60s, when I did the WGUC radio show. But I was already working, and I was always going, and, you know, my mother would take me, even then, to, there's a jazz club called the Whisper Room, who was run by 2 enormous, probably 300-pound twins that both played the piano. And the place was, it was like a piano bar. You came in, you walked past the bar, and then there was a piano, upright piano, short one, with a bar around it, and everybody would sit around. And then the band was on the stand behind the piano, like all squashed together. And these guys were terrible. They'd always play, Satin Doll. Every night that's what they do. And so I would sit in, and my mother would take me. Of course, I couldn't go in because I was like 14 or 15. And they'd let me sit in. Once they found out I could play, I'd go I think it was Sunday, and I'd sit in. So I got to meet all these great jazz players, the Cincinnati guys. And then in Cincinnati in those days, it was like less than 500,000 people. But it had more jazz clubs probably than Chicago. I mean, there were probably 10 or 12 jazz clubs in Cincinnati. It was just as good as Chicago or Cleveland or Detroit. And when people would come in, big famous people, Bobby Timmons, Miles Davis, they'd always play downtown at a place called, it was an downtown supper club called the Living Room. And when they'd get done, they'd come over and hang out at the Whisper Room. I got to meet all these great people that I had just heard on records, and sometimes even got to play with them. So I'm blessed. I mean, I'm not religious, but I'm blessed that all of this just happened to me.
You deserve to be. Nothing is coincidence, right, Kevin?
Nope, not a thing. Not a thing. Miles Davis, is that right?
I don't know if Miles ever came by, but Bobby Timmons came by. I think Cannonball came by one time. Different piano players, different horn players. Sonny Stitt.
Jimmy, I got to ask you, because you were here and you were active at the very beginnings of rock and roll, and
Yes.
Elvis Presley and Barry and all those guys. What was it about jazz that really got you hooked on playing jazz versus becoming a rock and roller?
And Jimmy, just before you answer that, we've got to take a quick break. Me and Kevin are famous for blowing through these because we love our conversations. So let's take our first quick break, and then I want to give you time to answer that question fully.
And we'll be right back in 43 seconds. Good catch, Burchell.
Love.
War and freedom collide in the Girl of Many Crowns. Judith of Francia's story will take you from the heart of royal courts to the chaos of Viking invasions. It's a tale of resilience and courage that proves history is not just written by kings, but by women who dared to choose their own path. The Girl of Many Crowns is available now on Amazon Books, Kindle, Amazon Audiobooks, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Book Baby Bookshop. Don't just read history, experience it. Order your copy today. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Burchell. That's her right there. My name is Kevin, and Jimmy Madison is our guest. He is a world-famous jazz drummer from the 60s and late 50s all the way to today. You've seen it all, haven't you, sir?
I've seen a lot. You asked me a question about rock and roll.
Yeah.
You said it exactly right. When I started playing, it was just the beginning of the end of what I would call the real jazz era. Now they have smooth jazz and this kind of jazz, and but it's jazzy, but it's not the original kind of stuff. But I never liked rock and roll. My parents, of course, didn't listen to that. They listened to Dave Brubeck, big bands, that kind of stuff, classical music. And all the way through high school, before I got in high school, I was already playing professionally, and I was playing jazz. Even on the club dates, we were playing jazz. We weren't playing, sometimes we had to play some dumb songs for the businessman's bounce people, but basically we played jazz. So, and I didn't pay any attention to rock and roll. I thought it was bullshit, pardon me. And I was working from the time I was 14 or 15 with people who were 10, 20, 30 years older than I was. I was still like way underage. I would go and play in bars where, because I played so good, they thought I was older. I'm sorry. Actually, the Kirshner twins back at the Whisper Room, after I had been coming and sitting in a lot of times for years, all of a sudden Herb Kirshner came up to me and he said, "Hey, listen, how old are you anyway?" And I went, "Well, he said, "No, come on, tell me, how old are you?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm 14." And he said, "Well, if you were 18, I'd hire you. But as it is, you can't come back without your parents." So that meant that Sunday jam sessions were out. So I went back to my house and I called my parents, and my mother decided to take me. She would take me on Sunday, and she'd get a cocktail, and I would get what do they call those things? A Shirley Temple, which was a non-alcoholic. And I still got to sit in and do all of that. But anyway, I still didn't pay any attention. When I was about 18 or 19 years old, an old friend of mine, David Matthews, not Dave Matthews, the rock and roll guy, but David Matthews, the composer arranger, he took me to his house and sat me in front of his stereo, and he said, "I want you to hear something." And he put on the Beatles for the first time. I knew they were out there. There's some rock and roll band from Europe. He put on Sgt. Pepper, and I was transfixed. And from then on, until now, they are I wouldn't even call them a rock band. I would call them a band of philosophers. The way the songs they wrote, what they wrote about, all of it. And then for some reason or other, on the exact opposite of that, the Rolling Stones, who are like a bunch of, mad, crazy, I don't even know what to call them. For some reason, I was attracted to that too. I mean, it was like Mick Jagger was just so out there. I said, wow. So between the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, that's the extent of my rock and roll. And I didn't play any rock and roll anytime all the way through high school and basically all the way through the rest of the closest I came. No, I wouldn't even call it rock and roll. When I worked with James Brown, we were playing funk, and I loved funk, black music, in other words.
Wait a minute. Hold on a minute. You played with James Brown?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Lord.
Kevin, I did my research. Why do you think I was so excited for Jimmy to be here?
Let me tell you, David Matthews, I mentioned him before.
Yeah.
James Brown used to record at a recording studio company called King Records, which was right across the bridge in Newport, Kentucky from Cincinnati. Well, David Matthews was, like I said, he was studying French horn and arranging at the I can't remember the name of the college Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati. And he was doing various work for various people, and he was doing it at King Records once in a while. So one day, apparently, he was there and he was listening to something that he had recorded for somebody with somebody, and James happened to be there and heard it and stuck his head in the door, and he said, who did that? He said, this guy, David Matthews. And James took him aside and said, I really like what you did. Will you do some arrangements for me? And he said, of course. So that's what started it. Well, over several years, David became James's music director. And so when I moved to New York, David was his music director. And just a couple after I moved to New York, we did a couple of records that were, James wasn't on it, but that was when they started doing multi-track recordings. So I would do things for James, but he wouldn't be there. Sometimes he would, but most of the time it would just be the rhythm section. And then James would come in and put on his part. The horn players would come. It was, Fred Wesley was there. Pee Wee Ellis was there. Maceo Parker was there. And so and then they went on a European tour, and James said, he liked to have a lot of drummers. He always had 2 or 3 drummers on any tour or anything. It was like the bullpen. He had been a baseball pitcher when he was young, and it was like he had the bullpen. He had, all the guys that he liked. He had Jabbo Stark because he played one groove. He had Don Juan Martin because he played another one. He had me because I played another one. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? I'm not his guys were in his band on stage were all like 18 or 20 years old. None of them could read music. And he would take them down to Macon, Georgia to his house and just go for weeks until they had the show down absolutely perfect. So I said, so what's going to be my function? He said, I want you to come along and stay backstage and learn the show. I went, learn the show? Okay. So all the way through Europe, in Paris, in London, and everywhere else we went, I would be standing backstage about 30 feet behind Jabbo Stark off of his right shoulder, learning the show. And the only thing I did on that tour was to rehearse a band in Paris for one tune and one other little thing, but I didn't do any live concert things. I mean, it was amazing. And, in fact, when I was in Paris, I went out for some reason and I came back to the stage door to get in and I started to go in there and they said, who are you? You can't come in here. And I said, I think James Brown. And they went, what? Get out. And so somebody came in and says, no, he's James Brown's drummer. So that's how I got back in.
Um,
That is amazing.
It
And
is.
Burchell and Jimmy, I gotta get this in because Burchell is going to tell you his website and then the book that he has written that is his biography, and we're going to talk about all of that. So go ahead, Burchell.
Yeah, so if you're curious and you don't already know, which I'm concerned, that's okay. Go and learn at drummerboyjimmymadison.com, spelled exactly how it sounds. And Jimmy, I'm going to let you tell us about the book and how that all fell into line because I'm curious.
Well, let me see, about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I would, whenever we'd be up here, I'm upstate right now. I stay up here all the time now, but I used to just come up on weekends. It'd be in the summertime. We'd be out in the back on the deck having dinner, and I would tell what I called coffee table stories about whom I played with and this and that. And people would all say, "Oh, Jimmy, yeah, man, that's cool. You ought to write a book." And I go, "No, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that." So one day, at one of those dinners, a guy that was a good friend of mine said, who was also a writer, said, "I think you should write a book." And I went, "No, no." And he says, "No, wait. He says, I'll be your editor." And I went, "Are you serious? Do you realize what you're letting yourself in for?" He said, "No, I'm gonna do it." I said, "Okay." So we started. He would come to my house, or I would come to his house, and he had his computer, and he would write, and I would talk, and we wrote together a large part of the manuscript. Sometimes he would advise me to say, if I'd say it one way, he'd say, "Well, it would read better if you said it that way." So in that respect, he was kind of editing as I went along, or proofing as. Well, it turns out later on, his name was Peter Buff, Beuf. He moved up to the Adirondacks, and we sort of lost touch with each other. And so he didn't actually become the editor of the book. In fact, truth to tell, I'm the editor of the book. I went over that. I went over that manuscript 100 times. And so then then I met Jane Snyder, who had been, when I was living in New York. I moved there in 1969 at an apartment building called the Allendale up on 99th Street. She lived down the hall on the same floor. And I didn't really know her, but she did know me, because at that point I was already going out and doing mountain climbing, and I would come back with all these color slides, and I would give slideshows in the lobby and put chairs and everything, and then really old-fashioned slide projector, and narrate the thing myself. And so she came to those. So I still didn't know. So I moved away. I moved, and I came up here about, I guess about 3 years ago. I got a call from somebody. She says, "My name's Jane Snyder. I said, "Oh, okay." She says, Are you the Jimmy Madison that lived at 808 West Ebb Avenue?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I was your neighbor." I went, "Oh, you." And she said, "Yeah." And so I told her I was writing a book. She said, "Let me read it." I sent her the manuscript. She instantly fell in love with it, and it became her pet project. She was the one who got me finished the manuscript. She was the one who proofread it 15 times. She was the one who did all. I don't know anything about about the publishing industry. You don't take your manuscript to a publisher. You have to hire a literary agent who then decides whether to take you on based on whether they think they can make any money out of you.
Yep.
And so they all have different proposals. They want 2 chapters, or they want this, or they want that. And they want research. They want marketing information. Well, Jane is a genius at doing that. She did all the research. It was pages and pages of stuff. And then she started sending things out to people. Well, long story short, nobody picked it up because I'm not famous in the general public. I was well known in the music business, but that's kind of an inside thing. And so we tried and tried and tried. And so about 2 years ago, she said, screw this. We are going to self-publish. She found this company called Book Baby, which is a publish on demand company.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
we worked a deal with that. And then, we still had to have the book. So she introduced me to a guy named Tom Ventris, who lives in Portland, Oregon, who is an award-winning book designer. In fact, this year he won the Graphis Design Award, which is an international design award for my book. He won the silver medal in the whole world for designing my book, and it's an 8.5 by. I'm going to hold it up.
Yeah, hold the book up.
Please do. And if you're not watching this and you're listening, I challenge you to go and see this on video somehow on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, also known as X, or YouTube and Facebook. You can see this book that Jimmy has created. And Jimmy, what is it called?
It's called, the full title is Drummer Boy, My Life Playing for the Greats of Jazz and Funk, and then underneath in parenthesis, with a little mountaineering on the side.
When we come back, we got to talk about that because Rochelle lives in a mountainous region, and so do I. And we would love to talk to you about how you got into mountain climbing and doing what you do with that. And it's, I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, but I'm sure somebody probably has. You've had quite a life, and you've done a lot of things.
People have told me that.
you met a lot of people, and we are going to take our quick halftime break. Jimmy's going to go fill his glass, and we're going to be right back.
That right.
And we'll be right back in about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So stay with us, everybody.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
Are you looking for your daily dose of inspiration? Stay connected to all your favorite shows, music, and news with the Brushwood Media Network app. From Positive Talk Radio to Greatest Vibes Unplugged and so many more uplifting voices around the world, everything you need is right in one place. It's easy to use, too. Always available and designed to keep you inspired 24 hours a day. Go to BrushwoodMediaNetwork.com and download the app, and you will always have Brushwood Media available on your smartphone. Download it now and make inspiration and music and conversation part of your everyday. And welcome back to Positive Talk. My name is Kevin. Rochelle is here somewhere, and she's coming back in just a second. And Jimmy Madison is our guest today. He has
refilled his glass.
He has refilled his glasses. So you've gone from a Chardonnay to a Cabernet.
This is a Carmenere from Chile.
Oh, very nice.
I really like that grape, Carmenere.
Yeah, very, very nice. That's really cool. And Rochelle's going to join us in a minute. She had an issue with her connectivity, but I wanted to ask you in the book that you've written and the work that you've done, at one point in time you were a jazz drummer, you played with the greats, and you were traveling all over the place, but you decided you wanted to be a mountaineer, or you wanted to go climb stuff. Is that true?
Yes. Shall I?
How did that come about?
Well, okay. After I had moved to New York City, and I was in 808 West End Avenue for several years, about 5 or 6 years later, one of my neighbors in the building, a guy named Sam, I was in Riverside Park, which is just a few blocks from West End Avenue, and I saw Sam run by with a backpack on. And I said, what's that? He says, oh, it's a backpack. I said, what do you do with it? He says, well, every weekend I go up, or whenever I go up to upstate to Harriman State Park, which is like 20 miles long and 3 or 4 miles wide. And I backpack. And what do you mean backpack? Well, I have a tent, I have a stove, and I hike around. And I said, you can do that right outside New York City? He said, yeah. So the very next week, I went out and bought a backpack and a tent and all of that. And my girlfriend at the time, who was named Lenore, we started going up and doing hiking trips in the summertime. And then actually a couple of years later, we did during, I forget what year, there were 2 enormous, like 15-inch snowstorms. So we bought snowshoes and we went up there and we backpacked in the winter. With, of course, you could camp anywhere you wanted because, we could even camp on lakes because they were buried under 3 feet of snow.
Sure.
And so we did that. And so one day, a couple of years after that, I would always go down to a place called Paragon Sporting Goods on Broadway to get my freeze-dried food for the backpacking. And one day I saw this bulletin board and it said, learn to rock climb, $35 complete, a phone number, and in New Paltz, New York. And there she is. So I had learned, there, let me do that. I called them up and my girlfriend and I went up there and that weekend and we took a rock climbing lesson and I was transfixed. This was so great. It just so I went, every week and I'd go and it was just basic rock climbing in the place called the Shawangunk Mountains, or the Gunks for short, which are about 100 miles north of New York City. Very famous rock climbing area. People come from all over the world to be there. And the same guy, his name was Art Fitch, and he was, I think, a physics professor in New Paltz, but he was also a member of the American Alpine Club. So he had decided he was going to take a bunch of people to British Columbia that summer for mountaineering to teach us to do it. And I signed up, and it was dirt cheap. I think the whole thing cost me, I don't even remember whether it was $300 or $600 for 2 weeks. It was so cheap. He lost money on it. We went to British Columbia, and to make a long story short, we went up to this group of mountains in the coast ranges of BC called the Sally Serena Group. And it's like Mount North Star, Mount Carmarthen. They're all over 10,000 feet, ice and snow, glaciers. it was really cool. We had to learn how to use ice axes and that was it. I said, okay, and from that day to this, and well, I don't do it anymore now. I finally retired from climbing about 2 years ago, but every year I would go out west. I went to the Tetons several times. I went to the Sierras. I went to Colorado. And, over the years, more and more and more, learned more rock climbing, more alpine climbing. And then in 1985, my soon-to-be wife, Sylvia, and I went to Chamonix, France. I went first with a couple of friends that were climbers from the Gunks, and we climbed in the Alps. And I met a guy named David Hamilton from Scotland, he was a real alpine climber. He lived in, very close from Europe, from Scotland, and he had climbed lots of stuff in the Alps. And I met him. Somebody said, hey, there's this guy who wants to go climb Mont Blanc. Well, Mont Blanc is the biggest mountain in Central Europe.
Oh,
it's over 15,000 feet high. And so I figured, so I walk, he's sitting in his tent. I said, what do you want to do? He says, well, I'd like to climb the Brenva Spur on Mont Blanc. And I was like, well, my heart was going pity pat. And so we sort of talked to each other about how, he was trying to figure out whether I was going to be a good partner. And I said, well, I can climb, like 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", which is pretty hard in those days. But I had alpine experience, snow and ice and glaciers and stuff. But he had really done a lot of really serious Alps climbing. So we decided I said, okay, I took my, girded my loins and said, okay, when do you want to go? And he said, well, how about now? I said, what do you mean? Go get your stuff. Meet me at the Teleferique at the center of town in 2.5 hours and we'll go. So, okay, I was petrified, but I figured, what the hell? You lead the rock, I'll lead the ice. I said, okay. I met him. We went up to the top of the Teleferique. We came out. We walked down into the Vallée Blanche, which is a great, huge glacier on the other side. And we started to walk around to the Italian side where the Brenva is, across the Mer de Glace. And he was like 6'3" or something like that. He towered me. And, and we roped up because the Mer de Glace looks like nice, smooth snow, but there could be crevasses. You could fall in a hole, anything. So I went first because I weighed way less than he did. He could pull me out easier than I could pull him.
Yes.
Exactly.
We walked around the mountain, and when we climbed up to I found out when I got to the top of the Teleferique that I had forgotten my hat, but he had a spare one, so I put that on. We got around to this ridge where we were going to climb up to an Italian Alpine Club hut called the Trident Hut. And it was so steep to get up to it that there was a fixed rope there that you could use to hold on to get up. Halfway up, a big gust of wind came and whoosh, my new hat was gone. So now I didn't have a hat again. I did have a silk scarf that I used to use, and I would wrap it around my head instead of a hat. So anyway, we got to the Trident Hut. It was foggy up there. The Trident Hut was this sheet metal shack that was hanging kind of crooked off. It looked like it would fall off the mountain. I was terrified. You could see Mont Blanc. You could only see about the first 1,000 feet of it, and then it was clouds. So I'm praying, let the weather be bad. We're not going to go. Now, that hut sits at 12,000 feet, and we had just come up from 5,000 from Chamonix. I felt like there was an elephant sitting on my chest. I mean, I couldn't breathe. So now I'm looking outside, and I look down at this glacier that goes down and disappears into the fog. And I thought, oh my God, what the hell what was wrong with me? You want to be a hero? Okay, hero. 2:00 in the morning comes. Goes outside. He says, we go. I said, okay. So we leave with all our stuff on, crampons, ropes, a pack with, sleeping bag and, bivy sack. It's so steep there again. We had to climb down face in down to the snow below the ridge, and then go around to the Brenva and start up. And the first thing that happened was we were crawling across this rock rib that was like shaped, like it was like this. And when you have to go on something like that, they do it what they call à cheval, which is like on a horse. So you have one leg on each side. The rope went down between me and him and got stuck on something. And I thought, oh my God, now what? Finally, I got the rope loose. We kept up, and make a long story short, the sun came up. It was beautiful weather. I climbed the whole rock ridge, led that. Then we got to finally at 14,000 feet, we got to a 300-foot ice fall, which was vertical. And he led that, and I followed it. And the ice was really rotten. I mean, you'd have to hack and hack to get through all the crud to get your axe to hang in. We got past that, and all of a sudden the weather changed and started to snow. We came up to the top of the ice fall, and we were like, here we are, and you could go that way or that way. And there was an ice wall in front of us, and we couldn't see anything. So we realized we couldn't go anywhere. So just like all the mountain books I had ever read, when in doubt, you got a bivvy. We dug an ice cave. It took us 5 hours. We dug right into the ice wall, a hole about 2.5 feet around, 3 feet, dug in, and then hollowed it out so that we could lay head to foot inside.
Yes.
We got in there all night long. The snow raged, and it kept filling up the door, which would mean we would suffocate. So we cleared it out every couple of hours. One or the other of us would clear it out. Well, by morning, it was like, our door was at the bottom of like a 4-foot berm of snow all around. We tried to escape. We went a couple hundred feet. I looked behind me and our tracks were disappearing. We went, there's no way we can do this. We went back and got in again. We stayed another night. Well, the next day, again, long story short, we made it to the top. We came down the other side. We survived the storm, in which at least 4 people died. They were on some of the rock ridges on the other part of Mont Blanc. And, we were lucky because there was ice that we could dig into, but there was no place for them they all died from exposure. So we were really lucky. Well, that was in 1985. In 1990, David called me. He, at this point, had started a company called High Adventure Limited, and he used to take people on treks, snow treks, the hot route between Zermatt and Chamonix. He would take people to Baltistan in northern Pakistan, and climbs. And I went. We climbed a thing called Vine Peak. It was 20,400 feet. You could see K2 10 miles away. Then we came down from that, and then we went over a pass called the Gondokoro La. Everybody else, from the group had left and went back, but there was him and me and another guy. We climbed, and nobody had been over that pass since like the 1920s. So we went over, and it turned out there was like a really weird big ice fall, all kinds of shit that looked like it was going to fall down on us. Mm-hmm. We went down there. We got all the way down to the Vine Glacier on the other side, right down to a place called Concordia, where the Baltoro Glacier and the Godwin-Austen Glacier and the Vine Glacier all meet, and K2 is right across there. We were like 3 miles from K2. Turns out we couldn't get across because there was such a big river that if you ever fell in, they wouldn't even find a piece of you. So we turned around and came back, and that's another adventure. We had to come back in the fog, navigating by compass, bearing, walking in a straight line, and we managed to get back. And so, I've been there and done it all, and I'm still alive to tell you.
It's called Jimmy Madison, The Journey.
Brachelle and Jimmy, we need to take our last break real quick, and it's just a short one, but we will be right back. It's just 30 seconds, and then Brachelle's got some questions, and I want her to be able to have some time. Some close personal time with you to ask a question or two, if you don't mind.
I think we've done that this whole time, but it's okay.
Yep. We'll be right back. Here's another point to ponder by Positive Talk Radio. After the longest night, the sun rose again. It painted the sky with colors no one had seen before. That's how life works. Darkness never lasts forever. No matter how long the night feels, your sunrise will come. Hold on. Light always finds its way back. You're listening to Positive Talk Radio, where stories of hope live. And welcome back to Positive Talk, and we've got a great guest for you today. And Brachelle's going to go over all of his information, where you can get the book, because we want you to go to Book Baby to get the book, because that's where we want you to go. Book Baby bookstore. And Brachelle, go ahead.
Yes. So we're going to do this twice. I'm going to go ahead and announce Jimmy's website. And if you are just listening in or you've heard this whole time, please visit this website. And it's literally nothing but motivation. You can't lose anything. drummerboyjimmymadison.com, spelled exactly how it sounds. And before we start closing out the show and we announce where to find your book and all those fun things, I have to ask you a question, Jimmy, because I've been wondering this all day. Through a point of your experience, and we have to have you back. I have to say that now, because there's no way. You have so many experiences and so much of a journey to inspire people that what they're going through, there's more. You can get through it, and you're worth that. But in the next short minutes, I just want to ask you that through these experiences that you went through and understanding that there's so many aspects and versions of life. How do I phrase this? What does everything being connected mean to you now?
Oh, well,
I know. I'm sorry. We're running out of time. I always do this at the last minute, but I have just, I've got to get a touch for what's going through your mind when I say that.
everything connected in my life.
Just in general, like, you know, you went all these beautiful mountains, and you went through these treacherous journeys, and you met people from all over. Just, don't you understand that everything is completely connected and we are all one?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I mean, I'm extraordinarily lucky that I had both my musical career and my, what do you want to call it? My vocation,
Of course.
music, and my avocation as a climber, and got to do more than just a little diddly boo rock climbing. Got to actually go to the big ranges, one time to the Alps, one time to the Himalayas, and a whole bunch of times everywhere else. But I cannot believe how lucky I am that, you know, my whole career has been like, one of my chapters in my book is called One Thing Leads to Another. You know.
Yes, sir.
Came to New York. I started working with Marion McPartland. She introduced me to another guy, and then Roland Kirk came in to visit, interview the saxophone player. I'm sorry, with who the heck, can't remember his name. And then he hired me, and then Joe Farrell hired me, and then, you know, then meanwhile
Ripple effect, right? The dominoes.
Thing and another thing. And I got to work with Chet Baker and Lee Konitz and Nina Simone and Quincy Jones, and, you know, all these people that were just like people in storybook land for me. And then all of a sudden there I was. And so I have no idea why I'm so lucky that, you know, I have a certain modicum of talent, but that doesn't explain the luck that I've had in doing everything that I've done, and especially with the mountain climbing, not getting killed doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to lead the song, Kevin, because he understands that nothing is luck. He taught me that. And your soul has purpose, and you have not only achieved that purpose, you have, I don't know if beyondified is a word, but that's a word now, because that's exactly what comes to my mind.
I like that.
You are beyondified, what your soul was sent here to do, and to, you know, maybe people don't know Jimmy Madison's story, but I'm honored to have you here on the show. I want to let Kevin maybe ask you another question. Have a comment, because I've taken over the show with you, Jimmy. So Kevin, go ahead.
She's just kicking butt. She's doing a great job, and I got to tell you, Jimmy, because I grew up with the Beatles, and I would, before we go, there are so many people that were not around in 1967 when Sgt. Pepper's came out, or from 64 when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And so they don't know the amount of notoriety that they had in those times. And can you speak to that at all?
Well, as I said, I didn't pay any attention to them at all until I was like 18. And David Matthews, long before I started to work for James Brown or any of that, you know, said, "Yo, you don't like rock and roll? Well, listen to this." And it just, you know, it blew me away. And like I said, I've been a lifelong fan of the Beatles. You know, Imagine, you know, just the songs that they wrote. They were, like I said, they were like philosophers. They weren't like trite rock and roll lyrics.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is the gospel according to Paul McCartney. You know what that is? Mm-hmm. Let it be.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep, I agree.
And you know, and all you need is love. They were ahead of their time, both in musical talent and philosophy of putting that all together. That and imagine what a song that was, or Let It Be, or some of the other.
Every song that they did was deep. It wasn't just some BS. You know, I love you. You know, the regular rock and roll stuff. You know. It was philosophy, every one of them.
It was just amazing, and you have been in your life because you were born, so you are 78 years young or so, I do believe.
Yes.
And you have got many years. What do you want? Where do you envision the last quarter century of your life to be?
Lucky.
Even over this.
I've really got not that many complaints about it. I mean, what could I complain about? You know.
Well, what I want people to do is to get your book and to read the history that you created so long ago. It is drummer boy Jimmy Madison, and he's a drummer boy and a prodigy, and now he is a man of note.
And now I'm an old man.
Oh no! I'm. They tell me that I'm old too, and I'm not accepting that label, Jimmy. I'm just not. So you can't either.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
You win.
And by the way, young man, there is a mountain behind me that's called Mount Rainier. Have you ever thought about climbing that one? It's only 14,000 feet.
You know, actually, Rainier, some folks say, there's two mountains that are scarier than Everest. One is Mount Rainier. A lot of people get killed on that mountain. It's serious. I mean, the weather about it. And the other one's Denali, in Alaska, which is 20,000 feet high, and it is probably more serious than Mount Everest because the temperature. I mean, it goes down to like way below zero. The wind is ridiculous. People die on that sucker all the time. Those are two mountains that I never wanted to have anything to do with.
And you know what they say now is Mount Rainier, because of the changes in the climate, has lost 20 feet in height.
Because
it's now 20
feet.
Yeah, because of the snowpack that is.
Oh no, it's getting shorter. I mean, the mountains that I climbed, you know, over the years, out west and wherever, probably you wouldn't even recognize them now. I mean, descent routes used to be down snow gullies. Now it's just rocks because the snow, the glaciers are gone. I can't imagine living in the Colorado and having to get your water from the Rockies, and now there ain't none because the snow is going to be gone, and then they're going to have to bring up water from someplace. I was so lucky again to be able to experience the mountains before they just started disintegrating because of climate change and human stupidity.
Amen.
And there is amen, brother. And there is a lot of that. And again, we've been talking with Jimmy Madison. Brachel's going to go over all of his information and where to pick up his book at bookbaby.com, and go to BookBaby and go to BookBaby, because that's what I want you to do, is to go to BookBaby. So Brachel, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, anybody who's listening to this, search Jimmy Madison on Google. You find everything you need. The man is amazing, as you've heard. And if you want to visit his direct website and you're listening and don't have a moment to be online, it is drummerboyjimmymadison.com. And Jimmy, I'm going to let you announce where we can find your book that is best for anybody who wants to read this to get inspiration for themselves. And then I'd love to give you, we're running out of time, but I'd love to hear anything that you have coming to mind through your soul as a message to share with our audience right before we take off.
As far as getting the book, the best thing for me is if you go to my website and get it from BookBaby. I think you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and other, but they take their chunk. So I only, with Book Baby, I get 50% of the royalties. With all those other companies, I get a considerably less per book. So it would be better for me if you do it through my website. And that's drummerboyjimmymadison.com. All I can do is thank you so much, both of you, for letting me be here.
It's our honor.
No. Yeah, it truly is our honor. And the next time you come back, Jimmy, and I need to talk to you about your total life experience from 47 to 2025 or 2026, and what it has meant, because you have grown up in the most unique time in human history, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with that.
and so I can't let you go. We're going to have to let you go today, but next time you're back, we got to talk about your life philosophy and what you've learned over that period of time, that we can then send that to kids today in their 20s and 30s so that they can figure out basically the secret of life, because you've lived it.
Who am I and what am I doing?
I'll do the best I can.
And I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jimmy.
You are a remarkable young man, and could you do me a favor?
Sure.
Raise your glass. I'd like to make you a toast.
Me too.
And the toast is, as Spock would say on Star Trek, live long and prosper, Jimmy Madison. You deserve.
How do I? There it is.
There you go.
I'll drink to that.
You have impacted so many people in such a positive way, and your work and your legacy will live on forever. And that is, I can't think of a better thing than that.
Thank you again so much.
We'll see you soon, Jimmy. And to all those who are listening, watch the whole episode, have some inspiration, and know you're worth it. We love you, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Thank you for being part of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where stories inspire and voices remind us of what truly matters. May today's conversation give you hope, courage, and a reason to keep moving forward. And just remember, till next time, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.